Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and how are you doing today? I hope you're doing very, very well. I'd like to continue the conversation, if I may, with respect to Criterion Collection titles that you might be interested in at least considering when it comes to potentially making some purchases at the latest Barnes & Noble Criterion sale, July 2019. It's very exciting. So now I'd like to talk about some Japanese films from the late 1970s and 1980s. The Criterion Collection has a lot of Japanese films. Films by Kenji Mizoguchi come to mind. Films by Kurosawa, of course, come to mind. Ozu comes to mind. And other filmmakers from Japan come to mind. And these are films from more or less a kind of earlier part of the 20th century. So, and post-war Japan, early part of post-war Japanese cinema. And so this is covering mostly the period from the 50s and 60s up through the early 70s, mostly. So I think there's a very wealthy and positive and quite healthy representation of the cinema in the Criterion Collection. It's quite vast, actually. But when it comes to the cinema of, let's say, the late 1970s and 1980s, I would say that the cinema of Japan that of this time in the Criterion Collection is actually not so voluminous as one might consider. So that's a very interesting situation because, at least for me anyway, because I happen personally to really love and admire the cinema of Japan from the 70s and 80s. And in particular, I'm focusing my energies lately on the late 70s, early 80s Japanese independent cinema, which is a very exciting period. But it's interesting that it's probably not getting a lot of attention in the Criterion Collection, at least relative to, say, the earlier classical period or the immediate post-war period Japanese cinema. So what I'd like to do, therefore, is to talk to you about some films in the Criterion Collection that are Japanese films that are from the late 70s and 1980s, just to give you a sense of what kinds of films are here. And they are all very interesting selections, and I don't think you would go wrong with any of them. Again, just for your consideration, let me just present to you a number of late 1970s and 1980s era Japanese films. The first one is from 1977. This is spy number 539, Hausu. Nobuhiko Obayashi's brilliant, oddball, madcap, zany horror comedy masterpiece of the nonsensical, illogical, and quite brilliant. And this film is one that has to be seen to be believed. If you haven't seen this film, you will be in for quite the number of surprises. I can guarantee that. This is a really bizarre, over-the-top, unique viewing experience in many, many ways, and I think it's one where you will not be disappointed in the slightest. It is a quote-unquote horror film, and so there are some scenes of violence, although I would say that the violence is tending more towards a kind of comic book type of violence, although it's still a violence, so it might not necessarily be for everyone. That being said, it is a one-of-a-kind film. It's probably one of the most unique film experiences of any film in the Criterion Collection. And so this is 1977, the Japanese horror, comedy, fantasy masterpiece that is a unique one-of-a-kind experience. Hausu, spy number 539 for your consideration. Next, this is Spine number 384. Now, this is the film from Shohei Imamura. So, this film is Vengeance is Mine. Shohei Imamura is one of the most important filmmakers from quote-unquote modern Japan, and his impact on Japanese cinema and cinema at large cannot be denied. He has a really piercing, socially critical eye. He has a sense of cinema that is very, I would say, tongue-in-cheek, also playful, very witty, also quite challenging. He challenges the medium in many ways, and he challenges us in terms of what we perceive and what we feel when we watch any of his films. And he has a number of films already in the collection, but if we're talking about a late 1970s, 1980s film, we have this film from 1979, Vengeance is Mine, which is a cold, dark, satirical, sometimes funny, sometimes quite brutal, oftentimes quite brutal, a very in-your-face kind of portrait of a murderer. So we have here, I think, Imamura at his very cold, brutal, calculating, and quite thought-provoking finest, with a central performance by the great Ken Ogata. You cannot go wrong with this film, Vengeance is Mine. Again, this is a film that has a lot of intensity, and one that is filled with some scenes of violence and sexuality. So this is not for everyone, that is for sure. So, but if you are okay with these sorts of intense moments, and believe me, this film is filled with those sorts of intense moments. And if you are okay with that, then I would suggest strongly this. This is one of the great Japanese films from this period. It is critically acclaimed here in Japan, and very, I think, appropriately so. This film is just a shock and a delight, and also a thought-provoking, chilling film that is still in many ways so irresistible. Now, this is a truly fine tightrope walk that Imamura is conducting here with great finesse and assuredness and skill. So yes, Vengeance is Mine from 1979, Spine number 384 for your consideration. Next is Spine number 567. This is from 1983. So this is from the director Kon Ichikawa. Kon Ichikawa, who is also a very important film director and artist and voice during this period, from the middle post-war period of Japanese cinema and onwards. And his filmography is very grand and very great and very wide in scope. So to have the adaptation of the Junichiro Tanizaki novel, The Makioka Sisters, his adaptation here from 1983, is an interesting choice. The novel is very dense and detailed and sprawling, but this adaptation, which is 140 minutes, is, I think, a very good one. It's an excellent one, in fact. So, and it focuses in on the characterizations, and there is a nice sense of, on the one hand, the sort of the for lack of a better phrase, antiquated notions of certain societal implications that confront these various characters in their own unique ways. But at the same time, there is a kind of modern imprint on this film that makes it fresh for, I think, contemporary audiences even today. And so that is a very memorable adaptation of this Tanizaki work. So, and Kon Ichikawa is a filmmaker that people should know if one is interested in pursuing some kind of study or journey or exploration of Japanese cinema. So the Makioka Sisters. This is spine number 567 from 1983. Again, for your consideration. Next, also from 1983, this is spine number 535. This is from the director Nagisa Oshima. Very important filmmaker in Japanese cinema, Nagisa Oshima. His filmography is one of the great delights in my own personal exploration of Japanese cinema. He is one of my favorite filmmakers, and his works are all so varied and different, and some are just so intense that they're, for me, almost unwatchable. And I mean that in a very positive way, because they just engender in me so many thoughts or feelings that it's very almost difficult for me to contain myself, as it were. So in other words, his works, I think, are very compelling, and included in which is this work, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Now, this is with David Bowie, Ryuichi Sakamoto, and Beat Takeshi. Also, he is Takeshi Kitano, but known as Beat Takeshi. And this is the film that is a kind of a remarkable and in many ways very memorable and bizarre work in terms of its focus and its sort of elliptical style that has this have these things of confrontations between past and present, which is also exemplified in sort of the clash of cultures in the context of wartime and this prisoner camp. So we have these various juxtapositions layered into the film, both immediate and then more subtle, and then more broadly speaking in terms of a broader grand canvas of themes and thematic exploration. Therefore, this film is quite remarkable already. But then you add into that the very unique, memorable, peculiar, and quite dazzling, in many respects, performances by these performers, and in particular David Bowie and Ryuichi Sakamoto. There is something quite unnerving in many respects about their performances and when they are on screen. It makes for a quite compelling watch indeed. And so there we have it. We have Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Again, this is a film that has a number of intense scenes. So this is a film that is not necessarily for everyone. So if you are wary of watching films with some degree of intensity or violence, then this film might not necessarily be for you. But if you are okay with that, then I have no problem recommending this film, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, as being an example of maybe a slightly mid to later Oshima work, but still undeniably an Oshima work in terms of his exploration of themes regarding war, regarding sexuality, regarding clash of cultures, regarding communication and lack thereof, and the hope for compassion or the tragedy of the lack thereof, and everything in between. So this is a very compelling watch and highly recommended. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, spine number 535 from 1983 for your consideration. Next, we have spine number 425. This is from 1984. This is a DVD, and from the filmmaker Hiroshi Teshigahara. Antonio Gaudi. Now, this is a DVD, as I say, so for those of you who are wary of purchasing DVDs, as far as I know, there is no Blu-ray of this, and I'm not sure if this will ever be upgraded. Who knows? But if you are interested, however, in a unique documentary I mean, it's called a documentary, but it feels more like a kind of visual essay, an almost silent visual essay that is essentially images and music. There are some spoken moments, or moments where we hear people speaking or being interviewed, but for the most part this is a kind of a film that relies on visual representations and juxtaposed or accompanied by a really eerie and memorable and quite melodic and beautiful soundtrack. This is a very compelling, as I say, visual essay style documentary. And it's very short. It's only, 72 minutes. So it actually goes by very quickly. It has a very nice, brisk pace to it. And yet it is still this kind of visual essay and shots of landscape and architecture and design combined again with this music. And also it explores also the broader context of culture and a people captured in a period of time. Here it's the early to mid 1980s, and so we have a kind of time capsule essence about this film as well. Therefore, it is a really unique experience, and one that is something that you can absorb and just let wash over you and let yourself just be taken by the images and the music. So it feels like it's something to be experienced and felt almost on an emotional level, rather than I was going to say rather than on an intellectual level, but of course I'm sure it operates on an intellectual level as well, quite supremely so. So this is the documentary, Antonio Gaudi, spine number 425. This is from 1984. This is a DVD. So again, for your consideration. Next, spine number 868. This is 1985's film by Juzo Itami, Tampopo. This is a wildly funny, quite entertaining, not quite, incredibly entertaining comedy film. It's very funny, almost laugh out loud funny in many places. And it's about essentially food and sex. It's about food and sex. And so those are the two sort of, fundamentally important aspects of human existence, food and sex. And so you have those two combined here in a really a bizarre, funny, quite sometimes twisted, other times quite brilliant in its exploration of Japanese society and societal mores or mores. It plays with aspects of Japanese culture and kohai senpai relationships, and also this idea of a Confucian sort of respect of elders aspect that is beginning to collide with more modern sensibilities about generational differences and the like. And at the same time, it's just this funny film about Japanese food, or about food in general, and how we respond to food, and how we love food, and how we love food and we love sex, and we love this idea of a kind of ecstatic openness and reaction to food. The ecstasy that is reached is quite amazing and unbelievable, and almost shocking in some respects. There are some moments here that are actually quite shocking indeed. So maybe it's not a film that is necessarily for everyone. There are some moments of food sexuality. I don't know. There are also some other intense moments here. So it's not necessarily for everyone. But if you're okay with those kinds of moments, I think you will be very much entertained with this film. It is a film of its time. It is a film that is from the 80s, and it's in many ways it's an exploration of Japanese society from that time. So it is of its time, but at the same time, it is universal. It is a film that I think can be enjoyed so much even today, and I think in fact it is. And it crosses cultures, it crosses borders, and so one doesn't need to be Japanese to understand fully what is going on here in its exploration of Japanese society, but also taking a step back, looking at it from a more universal angle, makes for quite an entertaining work indeed. So this is Tampopo, spine number 868, for your consideration. Last film, this is a film that I don't know if it's correct to call it a Japanese film because of its production history and the like. But it was a film that was made in Japan, and it was made with Japanese actors, and it is a film that is in Japanese, the Japanese language. It is directed by Paul Schrader. This is spine number 432. This is the film Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters. And I mentioned this in the conversation about Japanese films. Again, this is a film that, in that discussion, should have a very big footnote after it, because it is not, I don't think, it is a film that, because of its production history, might not necessarily be considered to be a quote-unquote Japanese film for purposes of that kind of classification. That being said, of course, there are aspects of this film that I think are very significant to Japanese cinema. It is a film that is about a story of a person in Japan who is very well known in sort of 70s or 60s, 70s Japanese literary history, as well as, for better or for worse, Japanese political history, at least to a certain extent, Yukio Mishima. So we have a subject matter that is quote-unquote Japanese. We have actors that are portraying the story that are Japanese, and they're speaking the Japanese language, and there's a depiction of or excerpts of novels that are depicted that are Japanese novels. And so there we go. And then we have a direction by Paul Schrader, music by Philip Glass, and so we have this very interesting combination. But if we were to look at it in its relationship with Japanese cinema, what can we say? Who knows? It's an interesting issue to bring up, but again, if you understand that my discussion of this film, at least in the context of this video, should have a huge footnote or asterisk by it, then I hope you'll let me just say that there are aspects of this film that link to Japanese cinema, not one of which being the fact that there are so many Japanese actors here that represent that are very famous and that represent many aspects of Japanese cinema, all the way back to early Japanese cinema, Ozu, and also Imamura, and also more contemporary Japanese cinema of the time, and also theater and music and literature. So there are so many links. And if you look closely, if you know Japanese cinema and you know Japanese literary history, you can spot all these people who are really famous, and so it becomes this collection of all these different personages that I think are so key and fundamental in the context of Japanese cinema, which therefore makes this film, I think, an interesting exploration. While not necessarily being a quote-unquote Japanese film per se, it is still a beautiful, unique, quite bizarre, and one-of-a-kind telling of an impression of this real-life personage that was the figure of Yukio Mishima. And so, my friends, spine number 432, Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, for your consideration. Okay, my friends, let me end it there, and I hope you found some titles there that might be interesting to you, and maybe you might be able to make some more purchases during the Barnes & Noble Criterion sale. I hope you're enjoying yourself and that you're having a good time with it. And if you want to talk about other Japanese films, or you have any other suggestions, please feel free to leave them below. Again, I've focused here primarily on late 70s, early 80s, or yeah, early to mid 80s Japanese cinema. So I haven't focused anything else, and I haven't focused on all of the films from this area that are in the Criterion collection. There are some other Oshima films, for instance, that are from the late 70s that I haven't included. So, but again, this is just a sampling. And I haven't talked about any earlier films from this period. And I also haven't talked about films during this period from filmmakers like Kurosawa, for instance. I've sort of left that because I've talked about Kurosawa films in other videos. And so that's the reason why. But if you want to leave any recommendations for any other Japanese films in the Criterion collection for other people here to consider, by all means, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. And also, if you want to share with me your Criterion collection acquisitions during the sale, please let me know. I'm so interested in hearing this. It's such a great thrill for me to get to hear about this. So at any time, please leave a comment or comment below in this video or any other video, and I'd be very happy to read it. Okay, my friends. That's it. So thank you very much, and thank you to all of you, my friends, who have subscribed, and any new subscribers here who are new to the channel. Welcome. It's always nice to see you, and please feel free to comment anytime. I love to engage with people through the comment section. It makes for a very exciting and informative time for me to be able to learn from you and to get suggestions and recommendations for films from you. So it's really great. So, and for those of you who are watching but who aren't subscribers yet, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. It really helps out a lot, and it really helps me tremendously in terms of this YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe below, and please join us in these conversations about cinema, Criterion, and also not just Criterion, but just cinema in general. It's a wonderful thing that we all love, and it's this thing that we have in common, this love of cinema, which hopefully will make for a lot of great discussions. So anyway, my friends, thank you very much, and until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. Please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Cheers.